possessed you to move back to Ireland in 2007, in the heart of the worst recession in about 5,000 years, and set up a brand new enterprise in a completely new sector that you didn't really know that much about?
Well, interesting enough, I've been saying to Geraldine for probably 2 or 3 years prior to that, I'd like to move home, I'd like to come back home. And one evening around the dinner table, she said, look, would you just shut up or do it? And I think she expected the former but got the latter. And about 6 months later, we were here.
Really? And what were you doing before?
I was involved with execution of media campaigns, so basically responsible for above the line, below the line and online media campaigns for blue chip organisations.
And why did you think cider? Here's a good idea. Why don't I set up a cider company?
Well, I kind of blame it on my father-in-law, who's a wine grower from France. He bought the first apple press. We have a small orchard here. When we moved over in 2007, which granted wasn't the best timing, I started pressing some of the apples here, and from the moment that we moved over here, it was obvious that I was still going to have to commute overseas to basically provide us with a living, and I was forever looking for ways to come back. And in my spare time, I'd pressed a few apples, and granted the only people who wanted to drink it were me and the local rugby team, but it was when our son Colin was born, I took some time off and I discovered that the Irish drank more cider per capita than any other nation in the world.
Really?
Yep, and that was kind of the light bulb moment. I thought, hang on a sec, there's so much better than we can do than the industrial varieties that are already on the market. We have an ideal climate for growing apples. I enjoy pressing a few apples, so put 2 and 2 together and came up with 4. We got the initial equipment from my father-in-law and we started here in the courtyard. And the apples came thick and fast, and it was messy. It was very messy. But I was away for 5 days of the week, so it didn't affect me that much. But poor old Geraldine had to put up with it.
What was it like? I mean, can you remember the first day?
I can never forget that. The courtyard was a pool of rotten apple, which the dogs were happily jumping in and getting in the house. The kitchen was the laboratory, the dining room here was the office, and I had to do all the labeling by hand and the deliveries with the children at the back of the car, really. So it was great fun, yeah.
When you make all the good product and people are happy with it, the other key thing is you've got to get it to market. So distribution is key. I knew nothing about this sphere at all, neither of us did. We got into bed with 2 or 3 distributors to begin with because I didn't want to put all our eggs in one basket. And it's an extremely cutthroat environment. They're working on wafer thin margins and they'll do whatever they've got to do to make their business work, which isn't necessarily ideally good for you. So about 2 years ago now, year and a half, 2 years ago, we took the decision to plump for one, and so now we have an exclusive relationship with them, and it's worked extremely beneficially for both them and us. We're a fairly unique product. We have a reasonably good profile within the market. People are aware of us, so it's good for them to be able to open the door to get into other product sales within their portfolio. And for our perspective, we get fantastic market data, so we know who's buying it, when they're buying it, who's buying more, who's buying less. So we get huge transparency, whereas each of the distributors that we had before were holding their cards very close to their chest and wouldn't tell us a thing.
Right.
Whereas now we can actually, we have fantastic transparency across the market, which is huge. So distribution is key, and the more competitive the market becomes, the more key that becomes. And you have to find the right fit, because there are plenty of people who want to stack it high and sell it cheap out there, but you have to find somebody who's got the same vision with their corporate strategy as you do with yours, so that they are aligned, and you want to avoid friction at all costs.
Right.
There are a few golden rules which you have to have. Number one, you must be the only product of your variety in their portfolio, so they sell no competing products. Number two, that they have a long-term strategy for the integration of your product within their portfolio of products. And number three, it's got to be a chemistry thing. You have to look at these people, straight in the eyes and say, yeah, I would actually go and have dinner with them on my time off, and I think we could get on. I think we could plan things, and understanding that they really do, they're on the same wavelength, and those are the key things. And never give product away for free.
Really? Right.
Never do it. The
company has been transformed by a major deal with House of Beer, the Carlsberg subsidiary. You have to produce vast amounts of cider for a whole new market. I mean, that's quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I have to pinch myself to remind myself what a game changer it is. I guess, you know, the whole House of Beer thing I'd categorize in 4 phases. We had the introduction, which was basically done by a guy who runs a pub in Paris called the Green Goose. And we'd been selling in Stonewell to him. And he suggested, you know, there's a crowd I really think you ought to meet. And he introduced us to House of Beer, which is part of Carlsberg, France. And then we went through, I guess, what I would call the courtship phase. And at that stage, obviously, we were thinking, oh gosh, we could do with this, we could do with this. I think from their perspective, they were looking at us and going, here are a really small player. Can we trust them to supply us with enough product if we really put the foot in the gas to sell it in the French market? So that was kind of the phase where we were sizing each other up. Could we do the job? Would they do the job correctly for us, or would we just become a throwaway if it didn't work? So once we'd gone through the courtship stage, I call it the sort of preparation of the bride.
Right.
They'd said, well, right, for our market, what we want is a specific blend for the French market. So we said, okay, well, we can handle that. Can you give us an idea of what sort of characteristics you like? And we went through a long iterative process of putting together this blend. So again, you know, and when you're working, because we were working in very small quantities because we were only doing little tasters with them, it's very tricky because, you know, the minutest element that you're out in relation to your ratios, and it completely changes the flavour of the drink.
Right.
So we were toing and froing backwards and forwards with them in Paris, and it took us about 9 months to get to a blend that they were happy with.
Really,
And we're
right.
going, come on.
And you just kind of jet over with a couple of
bottles under the arms,
your
off you go,
right.
chill them down, go into the office. They'd have a panel of people together, including some of their sales staff, and we'd do a tasting.
Really, right.
And we'd rate it for, you know, various characteristics associated with that. And, you know, much better, must try harder, off you go again. And we just went through that iterative process again and again and again. Came back, they were happy, boxes ticked, contract signed.
And what did you get a call here? I mean, how did you know that you'd got it?
Well, I was actually going over to meet a prospective client in the UK. I remember when I got the call. It had been a very good meeting with the UK customer. We were just going off for dinner, and I was in a taxi, and I got the call. And the first thing I wanted to do was yell blue murder, but of course I had a customer right next to me, so I'll call you back later. Call you back later. So the steam came out of my ears for a few hours, and then the following morning I discovered what was involved and what we had to do.
How do you negotiate with a giant, big multinational? I mean, how do they not eat you for breakfast when you walk in the door?
I think you go in believing you're a lot bigger than you are. You go in drawing a few red lines across which you will not cross, and that's where you set out your stall, and you go in, I am going to get this deal, and these are the rules of the deal which I will not transgress. I will give on these key areas, but I won't give on those. Those are my red lines. You know, without going into too much detail, House of Beer Carlsberg France are actually paying substantially more than they originally wanted to pay. But what we emphasised was, look, this is not a concentrate cider. This is a traditional cider made from fresh juice. There is only, you know, there is only one way you can make this cider. There is a cost associated with that, and if you want this product, that is the cost you have to pay. And so I think that's the way I'd say it. You mustn't in any way feel diminished or frightened or scared, because then they will put you in the corner that they want. They'll get you to overcommit for a product that you can't deliver at a price you don't want to sell at. So you've just got to go in with as much bravado as possible, but having thought through your strategy very, very clearly. But you have to go in with those red lines. You have to go in with the belief that you're bigger than they are, or at least bigger than you are, and that you've got the courage to say, this is what needs to be done. But you have to have the patience. I think that is key. You have to have the patience. Don't expect them to move at the speed that we will move at, because it just doesn't happen. They always take the long view. You might want to do the deal in 2 months. They'll be happy doing it in 18. So you might be thinking and getting, salivating at the idea of doing a deal of this size, but just, don't rush your fences. Take it steady, take it at their pace, and you'll get there.